Today, I'd like to talk to you about the potential market for your invention. Your goal in this project is to design a new invention that could be built using reclaimed materials in a developing country. And in order to do that, in order to design something that could be successful, you need to have an understanding of this market. Now, I don't want you to think about the word market in a capitalist sense and think, well, what can we sell and make tons of money out of? It is in this case the most convenient word to use, but I want you to think of it as a broad term for the kind of place where your invention will be deployed, the kind of people who might like or dislike this invention. And this is basically what it comes down to. You have to come up with an idea that people will like and want for it to be a success. Otherwise, it will just die out. People won't buy it, they won't build it, and it won't get anywhere. And what people want tends to be based on two categories. First of all, what they need for their basics of existence. So things like food and water, shelter, warmth, that kind of thing. And what they want in terms of wishes. So their aspirations for the future. Maybe they want more free time. Maybe they'd like to see their relatives more often and their relatives live a long way away. And maybe they want a better education, or maybe they want a better education for their children so that their children can enjoy a better lives than they do. Now, it's important to realize that these wants, these needs and aspirations, they depend very strongly on the country and the community. And you'll see what someone perhaps finds attractive in Japan is not the same as what someone finds attractive in Chicago. And these are both two places in the developed world. And it's important to realize that within these communities, wherever you go, there's a demand for inventions and developments and things to remain authentic. They want to do things their own way. They don't necessarily have the American dream from the 50s and 60s of having a white wooden house with a white picket fence and two kids in a car and a steady job in the automotive industry. Maybe that's not what they want, even though in certain places and at certain times, that's been a very strong dream. So, I'm not an expert in this field. I've supervised the project for several years, and I've taken a look in some detail at communities in developing countries, mostly through using books and things that have been manufactured in these communities themselves, as you will be doing. So it's up to you at this stage to choose a country, and within that country to choose a community to focus on. Because you can't look at all developing countries. They're not a single category in which all of the wants are the same. They have very different communities in them, some wealthier communities, some poorer communities, communities in hot countries, poor countries, countries with very heavy rainfall, countries that are very dry and undergoing a drought. And within this project, you only have time to look at one country and one community. So at this stage, you should be thinking which country, within this country, which community. It would help a little bit if you could choose one where you can get a decent amount of information about it. That varies a lot. And maybe you know some people who've grown up in a developing country or worked in a developing country, and maybe you can help them. Or maybe they can help you. Sorry. The core of this assignment is really you need to develop some understanding for the people and what they will react well to. So what they will find useful, what will help them, what they will consider valuable, and what they will invest their time and money in. Now, to give you some examples of the basic needs, which are very common throughout many developing communities, and many of the buildings are very simple. And that means that they're often poorly insulated. So in the night, they get very cold. If the country experiences a cold winter, then they'll also have problems keeping their buildings warm in the winter. You'll also find that in the summer in some countries, particularly places like India, then the temperatures can be very high and the air can also be very humid. So maybe 40 centigrade air temperature and 80 or 90% humidity. So on the verge of raining all the time. And in these communities, it would, for example, be very nice to have some way to cool and dry the air, some kind of air conditioning. But in the poorest places, that's not really possible because you'd probably be looking at spending several months' income on the most basic kind of air conditioner, if the air conditioner was even available to buy in the community. Other examples, electricity. Some communities don't have electricity, and you'll find in a lot of developing countries people do have a mobile phone, but they need some way to charge this phone. So ways that they could generate a small amount of electricity for lighting or for charging a telephone, that kind of thing. Disposal of waste, because in these places there often isn't a waste collection service from the city, so waste gets abandoned in some part of their community. Maybe it just gets dumped on a vacant plot or thrown into a hole, this kind of thing, and it smells bad and it attracts things like rats, disease, that sort of thing. So devices that can take waste and maybe clean it, reprocess it, reuse it, even just compact it into a smaller bundle for transport, that kind of thing would be very useful. And also many people in these communities, they travel quite a long way for their own work. So maybe they have to spend an hour or 90 minutes in each direction every morning and every evening to get to work. So ways that they might be able to make this journey more comfortably, more cheaply, faster, that kind of thing, or ways that they might be able to earn money from home. That's also something that would be very useful to them. I'll give you an example of something that I think would be go down very well in these communities. In developed countries, we often have thermos flasks, so a bottle with some kind of thermal insulation in it, which keeps the liquid inside it warm. And it may be something that's made out of glass with a reflective coating on it, or the more expensive ones are often made out of stainless steel, and they have a vacuum chamber around the bottle in the center. And they'll keep a drink at a warm temperature for maybe 8 or 10 hours, something like that. Now, and these are probably too expensive for people to buy in the poorest communities. And also, if you buy a thermos flask that's made of glass, it's something that's very fragile. So if someone's doing manual work, maybe they're a gardener or a building site worker, that kind of thing, it's quite likely to get broken. But if someone could design a thermos flask that was built very cheaply out of reused materials, and something that was reliable so that it wasn't going to leak their tea or their coffee all over the place, then I think that's something that could be very successful, because especially if they're commuting maybe 90 minutes in each direction in a minibus to get to work, they can take along their drink of their choice. It can also be an authentic drink from their community. It's not like we're making them drink Coca-Cola when they would rather drink their own native tea from their own community. And they can take it along with them, and they can keep their drink hot and it's something to make the journey to and from work more pleasant. Things that I think probably won't go down so well in the communities are things that really don't refer to needs and are, should we say, European or American peculiarities. Two examples that spring to mind, a salad tosser, so a machine that has a bowl with a basket inside it, and you put your salad in and you pour your oil inside and your salad dressing, and then you crank the salad tosser to throw the oil all around over your leaves of lettuce and things. I think this is the kind of thing that people in a developing country would probably look at and think, that's just some strange piece of technology from Europe. That's no good to us, doesn't help us, and it's hilarious. Another thing would probably be a massage machine. A massage machine is something quite European and something that they wouldn't really need, would take up a lot of space, use electricity, probably wouldn't go down very well. To give you an example, here's a butterfly. This comes from South Africa. The way it's been made is someone's taken a length of steel wire, heavy steel wire, and they've carefully bent it around to make the shape of the butterfly's wings. They've then wound very thin wire in a matrix between the pieces of thicker wire, so that you've got a framework, and onto each piece of thin wire, they've then threaded colored glass beads to make the decorative butterfly wings. In the center, the wings are then welded onto an old spark plug from a car engine, which serves as the abdomen of the butterfly. This is interesting because you can see here it's taken a lot of skill and a lot of time to build it. And in these communities, you'll often find that you have lots of skills when it comes to what they can do with their hands with simple tools, and lots of time. But you won't find that you have things like 3D printers or robots, and these would be difficult to build there and difficult to maintain because they don't have the sources of consumables or spare parts or software or expertise, that kind of thing. Now, I know this one perhaps seems an odd example because it's something that's purely decorative, and someone who's maybe struggling to afford food or keep their house warm isn't going to spend money on something purely decorative or even want it. This is because the people then take these and they sell them to tourists, who then give them a substantial amount of money to take one of these decorative articles back home to Europe. So the purpose of this really is then to earn money for a community. You can also find a very good example on the internet if you go to the BBC News website and search for the name Hope Emmanuel Frank. Now, Hope Emmanuel Frank is a Nigerian boy who's built a functional toy excavator out of reused materials. And in the video it shows you how he's cut all of the structural parts out of plywood and then painted them, made pivots using thick pieces of wire, and then made hydraulic cylinders using syringes, the kind of syringe that you would use for drawing blood, for taking a blood test. He's taken these, he's then filled them with water, connected them together using flexible rubber tubes, and then has used a small electric pump and some valves so that it's actually a functional model. So this digger that's about this size can then dig into sand, it can take buckets out of sand, and it can actually work like a real building site machine. A very worthwhile video to take a look at when you're thinking about reused materials. I'll put a link to the video in the description for this video and when I upload it. So your assignment for the coming week is to write a text of about 200 words describing one potential market for your idea. Now, I don't suggest that you have the idea in your mind and you think, well, I want to make a device for removing the tires from vehicle wheels for recycling. Where could I sell this? I think it's better if you look at the community first, and then next week and the week after you'll be able to use this information about this specific community to improve your ideas and then to select the best one. But it's very important that you pick a specific country, and within that country pick a specific community, because many of these developing countries, they're very large. If you look at Nigeria, for example, where this boy Hope Emmanuel Frank lives, it's a country of 200 million people. It has Lagos, which is a really enormous city, and then it has more rural areas, country areas where they're farming, this kind of thing. And the conditions in these different places will vary a lot, and so will people's wants. So the basic needs and their aspirations and things will all be different. So take some time in arriving at a choice. Try to make sure that you don't all choose the same country. It's unlikely, but it helps if we've got a good variety of countries. And I want you to write this text of about 200 words by the 18th of May. You can then either send this by email to me as a PDF and I'll upload it, or you can upload it instant IP. It may be helpful if you include some pictures and some references and things like that. It doesn't have to be a very strictly academic text with lots of superscripts and footnotes and things like that, but it would be useful to know the basic sources of your information, even if the information's come from a conversation with a native from one of these developing countries. So, I hope this gives you an idea of where to start. It's certainly something that you should think about deeply, because, like I've said, the conditions there will be very different. To give you two further examples, you'll find in a lot of countries you have large multi-generational families. So you have a family that consists of children, parents, grandparents, and so on. Maybe a family of 6 children. Maybe you've got 10 people in total living in one house, that kind of thing. You'll also find that some of their priorities, like in many Western countries, it's important to think about, say, insurance and pensions and things, and these are just alien to many of these people because they have to think on a daily basis. Well, where's my money coming from this week or next week, that kind of thing. So be aware of those things and try to understand the people in the community that you choose. Choose a community that will give you some interest, so something that you think you'll enjoy researching. And if you have any questions or problems while you're writing this text, please let me know. Your 3 concepts and your profiles and things, those are due next Monday, so on the 11th of May. Thank you. That's all for today. I'll see you again next week. Goodbye.